Okay, I think all who have voted or wanting to vote have voted. So here we go. So there's sort of a bit of an overwhelming there, that both at 12:30. We will be recording. I've just put the record on because we'll record this section of the meeting. So if people do want to listen in to what has happened, we will make those broadcasts available via our Facebook page. So, or, you know, and via our website. So we will let you know that. Everyone can see those results? Yep. Yep. Excellent. All right, well, we'll now move into our member spotlight. So just going to hand over to Peter Fry to just, as an accountant and travelling in this interesting times, we're just going to get Peter and Scott to both share just a little bit about what's happening. We're then going to get Jenny to also give us an update, Jenny Newman, who's on our committee as well. And then if people have some questions, if you wouldn't mind typing, it's tricky when there's so many people all together, wouldn't mind typing them in the chat, and then we will see whether I'll be able to read those and see if there's anyone that can answer those questions. And then I'll get Chris and Kylie to give us an update from council perspective. And I'm hoping that perhaps you may be able to answer some of those questions that do come up. Please don't hold back. Yeah, we know that this is a challenging time for many. So we have an incredible expertise in this beautiful online room, and people that have just been doing stuff for a number of years and have links to some answers that you might have or things that you might need. So Peter, I'll hand over to you, and then Scott, I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Edwina, and thanks everyone. Yeah, Peter Fry, Chartered Accountant. We've been in this particular location for nearly 16 years. 6 years here and 10 years just on Maroondah Highway, but 16 in Ringwood. Prior to that, I had about 20 years in a firm in Doncaster. So background is, a long time ago, did a bit of audit and then took that process into business services. Our main focus is business advisory services, and of course then the tax information that spins out of that and doing tax returns. As I said earlier, also a financial planner, so wear a second hat, and we have a financial planning practice which spun out of people retiring and also pre-retiring, but also self-managed super funds. Back in 2004, I think it was, there was a big push on the ATO to, in their words, look at closing down self-managed super funds. So a number of us got together and formed a national body which was successful in turning that ship around, and now having the ATO very firmly on board supporting the SMSFs. That's now called Self-Managed Super Fund Association, and I was on the board of that for 8 years. So we have a bit of a niche specialty in that area as well. So given what's happening at the moment, as Gail and David would attest, the flood and volume of queries and what do we do here, what do we do there, how do we get JobKeeper, how do we get the boost, what's going to happen, my income has just completely stopped. By the same token, we've got clients that are saying it's never actually been better because of the style of business they have. A lot of offshore stuff is now coming onshore. So it's revitalising manufacturing, which is a good sign. But overall, there's a lot of pain out in the community with unemployment on the rise, and it'll just get worse. And what business will look like when it gets back, who will know? I reckon it'll look very different, and people will be asking very different questions as to how they run their businesses. So what we're seeing, it won't come back to what we call normal or what we had as normal. It'll be a new normal, and what that will look like will be very different. Given the financial markets as well, on the financial planning side, I've got a lot of people, you know, obviously saying, oh, what's going on? Should we bail out or not? We're saying don't crystallise your losses if you don't have to. We've got a few people that have had to settle on properties and things, so unfortunately they're caught in this current situation. There's a lot of, I'll say, sneakiness going on with the big industry funds as to what they're doing with their terms and conditions and valuations. It's not transparent, and suddenly it's becoming transparent because of what they used to do in the past. So that's something the public aren't really aware of. In the self-managed super fund space, it's a lot more stable, other than the fact that people have got investments in equities and also properties. And the issue with properties, whether you're in super or you've got it invested personally, is rent relief. And is your tenant still there? Are you able to provide that rent relief? Do it as a deferral, not a giveaway. Work with your tenant. You're better off to have someone there at the end of the day as opposed to no one and who's going to take your property. So there's just an enormous amount of questions. We found, and probably Gail and David found the same, we were absolutely flooded in the first 2 to 3 weeks of all of this. We're still getting a lot of inquiry now, but our role was more a shoulder, psychological support for our clients as best we could in the circumstance. And that presented its own challenges internally and with staff, in the sense of, well, who do they turn to? We've only got ourselves internally. So there's a lot of chat about, supporting each other. And yes, we're bearing the brunt of it, but we're still in exactly the same position. We're not unaffected by all of this. As everyone else is. Everyone's just in a different way and at a different time in terms of the process. Throwing in on top of all of that, trying to organise to get people operating from home. Everyone says, "Oh yeah, just work from home," but it's not that easy, and it's a lot clunkier. It's not as efficient. I see Gail's in the office. I'm still coming into the office while I can. I'm set up at home, but it's just easier in the office. But a lot of hand holding, even to apply for JobKeeper, and how do they do it? What do they need to do? A lot of applying for Centrelink that they never had to before, and dealing with that and trying to get through that maze. And on top of all that, we've got all our own normal work that we're trying to do as well. Life hasn't stopped, so we've still got the normal work. And the ATO aren't being very helpful in terms of deferrals or their deadlines. They're still wanting their information when it's required. So, but they're the challenges that we've got. I'm sure Gail and David have got similar. Everyone else has got their own challenges in different ways, and we sympathise with everyone there. We're just no different. We probably will lag the whole community by a couple of months in terms of the impact, but just because of the way things go. But yeah, just very interesting times. What it'll look like when we come out, who knows? So I'm happy to take questions. It's just a bit of an overview of where we are, what we do, where we sit at the moment. But if anyone has any questions, happy to do that, or happy to pass it over to Scott, because hopefully, in our sense, we're not sort of working towards where Scott is, but Scott will be in a very interesting environment at the moment in terms of social distancing and what they can do and how they can do it. But if you've got any questions, happy to answer.
I have a question. Sorry. Sorry, Ashley, you put your hand up first.
That's all right, you go.
Okay. I actually had an inquiry from one of my instructors who was a contractor, and apparently he hadn't lodged his tax return for last year, and he's been told by a tax agent that makes him ineligible for JobKeeper as a sole trader.
Yeah, buried in the information, I can't point you directly to it, but you had to have lodged your tax return by the 12th of March. And it's catching a lot of people out because the lodgement deadline's not until 15th of May for most people.
Yeah.
And sometimes in June. So it's very unfair. We're actually finding a lot of people are actually going to fall through the cracks. It's not as broad and as open as what people think. Because of the rules and how they apply.
The problem is about that lodgement, Catherine, is that if he was late lodging last year, then this year his return would normally have needed to be lodged by the 31st of October. Mm. You know, because you lose the tax agent's extension, you lose the extension of time if you don't adhere to the lodgement proceedings. So the fact that he hadn't lodged his 18 return on time meant that his extension...
19 return, I mean.
But you don't know what it's strange that normally if you've lodged BASs, we haven't lodged 19 returns for some clients, but we've regularly lodged their BAS returns and they are getting the stimulus payment. I don't know about the JobKeeper because that hasn't come to the fore yet.
Yeah,
no, the JobKeeper application is, I think, the 12th of March. The stimulus, which is the free kick from the government, is just when you lodge your BAS on your PAYG instalments.
Yeah, and a lot of our instructors would not be registered for GST. Some are, so they have no requirement to lodge a BAS. So, yeah. I've told him to lodge one anyway and see what happens.
Can't hurt.
No, exactly.
Ashley?
It's a no now.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Edie, you're muted, so I can't. I think maybe you were saying my name.
I was saying your name. Yes, I had muted myself. Sorry. Go for it.
2 questions. I lodged my BAS for January to March, and I paid the pay-as-you-go withheld, and then I got a payment from the ATO today, which, when added to the amount I'd already paid, added up to the $10,000. But I essentially only got a $2,000 payment from the government, and I paid $8,000 in my pay-as-you-go withheld, and those two numbers add up to the $10,000. But essentially, they only gave me $2,000. And the other thing is that my March 19 to March 2020 comparison is only maybe 25% decline. But if I average out each month for this financial year, say July, August, etc., to February, then the decline is around 35%. So I'm just wondering, is it worthwhile me calling up the ATO and saying this financial year my decline is 35% for March, but based on March 2019 it's only 25%? Can I still get the JobKeeper?
Yeah, so on the first one, and you can help me here, Gail, is the government stimulus was $10,000 or as a minimum, or 3 times if you're lodging quarterly, 3 times your PAYGW. So they've probably just taken the differential, but you will eventually get the other back if that's the case. You've still got to pay your GST component, but it's the PAYG, but the whole amount is offset. So they may just catch it up at the time.
Up to $10,000.
Yeah, you should end up with a 10,000 credit or 10,000 refund.
If somebody looks at your integrated client account on the portal, either your accountant or if you access it yourself, you will find that you've got an $8,000 credit there, which is the amount you paid. You can apply for a refund. I don't know whether they're arbitrarily refunding them. I mean, who knows? They weren't supposed to be paying this money until the 28th of April and they've paid it early, which is nice. But you'll find that there'll be an $8,000 credit there and you can get it back. And the second part of your question, from my perspective, is it's a month by month. It's either March or April or May or June that you have to go down 30%. You can't average it out. I think that's my understanding. Peter, is that yours?
There's a lot of combinations actually that I understand. So it's based on your BAS. So if you lodge your BAS quarterly, it's looked at the quarter last year, but you also then look at the month, as Gail said, the month of March last year, the month of April last year, the month of May last year, and see whether your sales are down by 30%. It's really awkward because some people have, like project type work where depends on what month it actually falls and they get a big kick. So if they haven't fallen by 30%, there is actually an avenue where you can apply to the commissioner to show. And as long as you've got good documentation, that's all you need, is good documentation to show how you've calculated your downturn and why it's that. So you might have had really good, say, sales in January and February and you're still collecting those, you're doing your BAS on a cash basis, but your sales have actually stopped. So you're still collecting your cash, but your sales have stopped. So you can actually use that to apply to the commissioner for his discretion to apply for, say, April as your downturn month. Because once you've applied for it and you get it and you can show that 1 month or that period is down, you're automatically in and you stay in. It doesn't matter whether you then recover or not, you can stay in. But it's a matter of working carefully with your accountant to get that through.
Yep, I've attended about 30,000 webinars on this, and slightly less. But yes, my understanding is that you can do a projection instead of an actual summary of your income. So if your March was okay, but you're predicting that your April will be dreadful, again, as Peter said, you just need to be able to support that with documentation that they should accept that without an issue. And you only have to qualify once.
Yeah.
Peter's putting his hand up, Edwina. Peter.
I just wanted to say that this conversation illustrates to me what the value is in having a good accountant.
Yes.
Couple there, obviously, so.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Dave Anderson, did you want to chime in with anything?
No, I think at this stage it only adds further confusion because there is a number of tests, and it's a matter of trying to weed your way through to find one that satisfies what you want. And I think that's the right in the fact that get your accountant to look at it. Don't play around with it because they're going to be coming. They're coming back. They're going to make sure that you do qualify, and if you don't, they're going to want their money back. So where you have done your own registrations and qualified, our advice is to, for the clients where it's borderline, is to park the money, and you may have to give it straight back.
I think one of the other issues that has come to highlight for me is where you've got casual employees, especially those that are like in the hospitality industry where they work sometimes and not other times. So they don't have regular shifts, they have ad hoc shifts. They've been there for 12 months, they're over 16, all of those criteria are met, but there doesn't seem to be any definitive instruction on what these bases of being routinely on the scheduled on the roster, because they're casual workers, and they pay out this amount of money, and then if it's clawed back, the young people may have already spent it.
Yeah,
So
well, that's right. Just go on that, Gail. There is in the recent HR stuff that was done with Fair Work, they issued what they called regular and systematic in regard to casuals. So it's a little bit off directly involved with this, but it does give some indication as where Fair Work see a casual fitting into the process, regular work.
But, casual is casual. Peter's probably got a comment on that.
If I can comment on that, from a Fair Work perspective, what it boils down to is that somebody who, depending on the size of the business, has been engaged for 6 months or 12 months on a regular and systematic basis. And what it boils down to is, would that person have a reasonable expectation of working certain hours going forward, because there has been a pattern to that. Now, that may mean that the business can still be seasonal, and there might be lower levels of work at part of the year and higher at others. But if that's the pattern, and it's regular and systematic, taking into account all those factors, there's an argument that someone in that circumstance could qualify.
The particular one that I was inferring was, one of the local ACE spacey type things, where they have the kids go in, they have parties. Some months they have lots of parties, so they have lots of support staff. Other months they have a few parties because of whatever. And all of those people have been stood down, and those kids have worked on the weekends mainly after school, because that's when the kids have their parties. So, how do you get a regular and systematic approach when it's as ad hoc as that?
But if they're regularly and systematically employed week by week, and that may mean, yes, there might be varying hours, but there is a consistent pattern of employment based on bookings, it's arguable that they could qualify.
And the worry about the employers in that respect is that if they pay out this money and then the tax office knock it back, you get it back from the kids.
Yeah, you won't get it back from the kids, and you'll be out of pocket. But
and that's what they can't afford.
Yeah, I agree with Peter that the style of the business, if you look at it in conjunction with the style and work of the business, I think well, it'd be unlucky if they don't qualify. I mean, we had one situation where someone was casual and they missed by 3 days on the 12 months, and they desperately needed it, and yet their co-worker who was permanent part-time had been there for 4 weeks is going to get it. So there's all of these anomalies in the, and it's the usual situation when you try and give across the board relief to people. There's going to be some that will be impacted, but you know, the other question is, well, you know, why did people get, you know, a doubling of the
benefit
job seeker allowance? Why are casuals suddenly getting, you know, a minimum of $1,500 a fortnight when they might have only been paid $300 a fortnight? Why wasn't it based on actual? So there's all these sort of, you know, equity questions that are arising as to how it looks, and everyone has a different view on what equity is. But, you know, is that fair to those that are really struggling? You go not qualify for JobKeeper, you go to Job Seeker, and suddenly your partner is working and earning a reasonable salary and still in work, and you don't qualify. But you got, you know, that's why they've had to look at childcare and all those sorts of things. So it's very like this whole is not medical, and it's medical, it's economic, but it's a lot more than just economic. If we look at 2008, that was just purely financial, where the banking system was virtually collapsing. So the value or the cycle of money was stopping at a higher level. This is just a shutdown of the economies by federal and state governments, and not just locally, but around the world. So it shows how serious this thing is. People just don't stop world economies for nothing. And, you know, I won't get on the soapbox about those protesting in the US. I think, you know, they want freedom and they will give me death. I say, well, open it up and let natural selection take its course. But, you know, you sort of look and say, well, this is major serious. It's far worse than what, say, the Great Depression was, and we never, well, our, you know, grandparents lived through that. But we're probably going to see pretty serious closeness to that as we come out of all of this, and the unemployment after it is still going to be very high. We're not going to get back for a long time down to the 5% and things like that. So, you know, that's a fundamental structural change that will happen to world economies.
And there's going to have to be a significant investment in well-being, isn't there?
Correct.
You know, that's the next big investment.
Gloria?
Yeah, I was just saying from a different angle. I've got a family full of doctors, and they have been struggling enormously. The first issue has been PPE, and medical centres as such have virtually had none, or very, very little. And the hospitals currently, all the major hospitals, seem to have enough for their day-to-day, but they can only wear a mask to treat one patient, and then it goes in the bin, because people are thinking, how are they going through all these thousands of masks? Well, if they see 20 patients, well, it's 20 different masks, 20 different overall covers, 20 different sockets. So it's, and the thing is so contagious, it's unbelievable. If somebody touches a surface, and as long as that surface is a hard surface, it could live on there for up to 4 days. So, you know, you touch a door handle or a bench top or anything like that, and you don't know you've got it. The other thing is the droplets, contrary to some of the information on Google and stuff, it actually has 2 sets of droplets. One's a very heavy droplet that actually falls on surfaces, and that's what most people are picking up, but it actually has an atomized droplet as well that can stay in the air for up to 1 or 2 hours before it settles to the ground. And you could be walking through a mall or down the road or in a car park and just walk through those droplets and actually get it without having contact with someone. It's rarer, but it does happen. And that's where the question's been coming from, is community. It's not so much that they've actually gone and hugged somebody with coronavirus. They just don't know. They just don't know where they've got it from. So it's highly, highly contagious. And if we didn't do what we're doing at the moment, it could potentially kill everybody in a country. That's how bad it is. So it's very fearful, and the doctors have, you know, they know the risks, and they're pretty frightened about it themselves, to be honest. And, you know, I've got small grandchildren, so that compounds all the issues as well with doctors in your family.
Yeah.
But it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. So the government, our government certainly has done the right thing, and where it's probably going to take away some of what we've enjoyed as a lifestyle, it probably won't take our lives away. And the biggest worry from the medical profession is that once it gets into Africa, it's going to do a lot of damage.
Jenny,
So
did you want to? Yeah, thank you, Gloria. Jenny, did you want to say, just add to that?
Yeah, I might jump in here. You all know me as a real estate agent, but in a very former prior life, I actually trained as an infectious diseases nurse. I worked at Fairfield Infectious Diseases Hospital for quite a few years. And so we lived through a lot of this. We, you know, AIDS came in while we were there. We had the polio wards with the lungs. We had measles, mumps. The difference in this virus, which is really important for us to understand, is, first of all, it was aligned with influenza, and we all know how deadly that is, and that it, you know, it's a really nasty thing to get. But we also know, because of the years that have passed through, that there is no immunity to influenza, which is why each year a new vaccination has to be produced for the new strain that's coming out. So it mutates itself every year and finds something stronger to try and then counter our attack to keep it at bay. The difference between COVID-19 and the flu is like, he's like your unsociable animal, the person who likes to keep themselves and only talks to a few people. And so it is a slow gatherer. COVID-19 is a very social animal, and it gets in contact with a lot of people and is very touchy-feely and spreads really, really quickly. So you've got countries that have taken on the herd mentality, where they've put aside their elderly and those that might be infected for the time being, and letting it spread through and see what happens. Now, their death rate's really high. But what we don't know in all of this is, if you get it, do we hold immunity? If I go back to when I was a child, and of course there wasn't the media we've got now, our herd mentality was, if your family member, your child, got measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, the rest of the family was notified, and they all brought their siblings along, and we all gathered in one room, and we went from one to the other until it was all done. And from there, over time, the scientists and whatever gathered the information to realise that we held immunity to those things, some people more than others. But it takes time. So my third child was the first child that had the measles vaccination. So it took all those years to get to that point. We've got something that we have no idea about. We don't know its contact source. We don't know how long it stays in the air. We're not even sure about the spread. We don't know if you develop an immunity to it. And so all these things have to be time tested, as well as a vaccination. So what the government has done here is right. We are on an island. They've closed us down. That's great. It has affected us. It will keep on affecting us. And as they give us some, lessen some of the restraints and give us more, they will then start clustering. And that's why they're bringing out the app, to try and help with that clustering, because it will happen. From what we can see across the world, children are not being infected. And that's a good thing. That our kids are safer than what we are as adults. But there's a long way to go. The biggest lesson in all of this is, and it is really important, it's that simple thing, wash your hands, and it's not about the water. If you put turpentine on your hands and try and wash it under the tap, you can't wash it off. But if you add soap to it and wash, it comes off. And that's the virus. So it's wet your hands, put soap on your hands, scrub your hands, pretend you're a surgeon, 20 seconds, scrub your hands, wash it off, sanitize. If you go out anywhere, sanitize. Take your wipes with you, take your sanitizers with you, and that will help you more than anything else will. So when we worked at Fairfield, we weren't inoculated against anything. Our barriers were uniforms on the ward, didn't come off the ward, gowns in each room, stayed in each room, and we washed our hands and washed our hands. And every time we thought you washed your hands enough, you did it another 50 times. So that's what we all need to get into our head. And social distancing, hard as it is, it's what we have to do. And that will help us. But this is a lot, you know, and Peter's right. When we come out of this, it's going to look very different to when we went into it. And some of that's a good thing. You know, some of it's not a good thing.
Just comment on that in the sense, probably one of the good things, one of the interesting things to look at is the Singapore experience.
Yep.
So they shut themselves down very, very quickly.
Yep.
They were able to, and everyone just does what they're told there. So they had nothing. They've relaxed their restrictions and allowed people to come in and start working again, and those that are in the dorms, and they've now got a major spike in a resurgence of it. So that's what we've got to be careful of.
Exactly, and that's exactly what will happen. On a smaller scale, you know, we've got a cluster that's just happened in Tasmania for the same reason. So we have to be mindful. This is not going to go away on its own. And as I said, there's no way at this moment that we can know if once you've got it, you don't get it again. And unlike the flu, you don't just get sick, it shuts down your organs. So you know, if you're not in a position to fight this, then you're not going to be able to fight this. So staying isolated and doing what we have to do is incredibly important, and protecting the people that are vulnerable really, really matters. And, you know, if we're isolated and feeling lonely, so be it. We're protecting everyone else while we're doing it. So I think that's a good thing.
Jen, I'm just mindful of time. Scott, I'm really sorry. Would you mind if we got you to give a little presentation on May the 5th? Would that work for you?
Oh, that's absolutely fine. I do have something to add to this conversation.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So this is what I want to say. I think Gloria and Jenny have given us very honest overview of what the situation could potentially be. I'll tell you something from the funeral services industry. As of right now, people aren't dying of this disease. What the government is doing is working. We have not had an uptake in funerals because of COVID. It hasn't happened. It might, but it hasn't happened yet. And what all of the safety measures people are taking are working.
Absolutely.
So that's a real positive thing. Like, I'd hate for this meeting to wrap up on a note of, you know, people feeling uncomfortable, or it was one of the things I wanted to say as part of my sort of little presentation. But at the moment, Lapine is as busy as we've always been because people are still passing away at the same rate that they always do. But we haven't been impacted by more deaths because of COVID. The big thing that we've been warned about is, and a lot of people use the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic as a thing to measure this against. The Spanish flu killed 8 times more people in the second wave than in the first wave, which is why the government's being very cautious about releasing the restrictions that we've got. But it's really important, I think, for everybody to know that as unusual and desperate and unprecedented, it's a word that's getting overused, but as unprecedented as these times are, people aren't actually dying in Australia. We're very, very lucky.
Peter McGuire, Peter had his hand up. I'll just quickly, Oh, you're muted, Pete.
Just unmute myself. I'd like everybody to put their hand up, like that. We're all doing fantastically well. Give yourself a high five.
High five. That's great. Look, I'm just, Kylie, Kylie gone? Still with us. Kylie. I can't see Chris. He might have had to duck out. Yeah, and I'm really sorry that, look, I didn't want to stop discussion. People have burning questions. It's so important that people feel heard. I knew that we had incredible knowledge amongst this group. But Kylie or Dan, would you like to just quickly give us a bit of an update on what Council is doing? I'll get Dave to do a bit of a lunchbox, and Kerry's got wants to talk about Anzac Day. So if people can just bear with us, and we'll just be a few minutes or so. But I really just, thank everyone for their contribution and the expertise that lays in this beautiful virtual room. But Kylie, hand over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Just a quick update, I guess, on what we're doing. So from a council perspective, we're still providing the majority of our services out to everybody. We've still got maternal and child health happening, still got Meals on Wheels, our aged and disability services, youth and children's immunisation, all of that sort of stuff, waste, that's all still actually happening. We have a number of our services that so, for example, I'm sure most of you would be aware our leisure services are closed at this point in time, as are a lot of our arts areas, such as Carolina. So when this started, Council applied its pandemic plan. So we actually have a pandemic plan, and we've had a number of our emergency management staff who have been doing an awesome job of working with Emergency Management Victoria to actually work in each local government area, each LGA, and to look at what's happening with its most vulnerable citizens in particular. So we actually also, from a council perspective, established council's crisis management teams. So that includes our CEO, our directors, and a number of our emergency management personnel. So they have actually been meeting daily. They've gone to 3 times a week at the moment. We've just stepped it back, but up until this week, it has actually been daily that they meet for 2 hours as we work through where everything is. Each of their meetings include a situation analysis and impact from state and federal, as well as looking at where we're at, not just across community, but also with our staff. We're a large employer. So, we have over 1,100 staff across council. So it's a large group as well that we need to look after at the same time as looking after our community. We also have, as I said, a number of our community facilities like our customer service, our libraries, our aquatic leisure, Carolina, Realm, Maroondah, all of those sorts of things that, all closed down, golf courses, causing kerfuffle, but they're closed, our tennis clubs, our sporting. So there's a whole lot of those, which also meant that from a council perspective, we stood down a number of our casual staff at that point in time, which is, Peter, you were talking earlier about the inequity. Well, there's a classic case from a local government area at the moment. Knox Council outsources all of their leisure services to the YMCA. So all of their leisure staff actually are entitled to JobKeeper. Because Maroondah Council chooses to actually run leisure services in-house, none of our staff are entitled to JobKeeper. Yeah. So there's a really, in trying to look after wellbeing and look after our staff in that respect, there's been certainly some really large challenges across council as well. Our web and phone and digital contacting has really gone up a lot. We've had somebody actually just working that part. I think we've found one of the interesting things has been, everyone's out having a walk at lunchtime, aren't they? Or a walk up work or a walk in the morning. So from our operations team's perspective, they've gone from averaging, I think it's around 10 to 15 phone calls or messages a day about things that, a tree down or a fence down, to some days 200. Where we've had our community coming back to us about, we saw a tree down this time, or, that fence is not right, or this path needs something. So there's been different things that have happened that we hadn't expected in actual fact. So our operations team is actually busier than they've ever been, which is what they weren't expecting in actual fact from that perspective. Apart from most of our key employees, we've actually got most of our staff working from home, so where they can. We were in the very fortunate position as a council that last November, our IT, with a lot of foresight, actually made our entire council portable for the very first time, and that has made a huge difference for a council being able to deliver its services in a far more straightforward way that, you know, has been able to continue because of it. So there was a lot of, you know, very good stuff done last year that's really meant that we've actually moved forward a lot better. From an Eastern Regional survey, Eastern Region perspective as well, I know Chris was actually going to talk about, he's the chair of our Eastern Regional Development Group and of what is it? MREG? No, something like that. MREG, that's it. Thanks, Dan. And they've actually done a whole survey around business sentiment and about how our businesses were feeling right across the eastern suburbs. So I know, Chris, you might want to put that in, Edwina, for Chris to speak about it the next one, because he's actually doing quite a lot of work around that survey and looking at our local businesses and what's happening from that perspective.
That sounds great.
Following, probably from for everyone's perspective, from the Victorian government changes as well. Our budget's been moved, so that's a really big deal from a council perspective. Our budget will go out. We were due to have our budget meeting on May the 1st. That's now been pushed out. So state government have pushed budgets, can be till the 31st of August now, to actually enable councils to really look at the impact that this is having. We know that this is having a very large impact on our budgets, and there is a huge amount of work being done at the moment for the impact that this is going to have across all of our budgets. Not just this year, but also next year as well. You know, we know the hit that we're having now, the hit for next year is also going to be. So we've already started to do things like put a little bit of a slowdown on any of our capital projects as we start to look at where we can spend money and where we need to hold at the moment to ensure that we can do things where we need to for community, because coming out of it is going to be as important as right now. And while state and federal have got lots of supports right now, when we come out as our closest level to community, we want to be able to do some things then and not pull too many levers too early that are not going to enable us to support our community and our businesses as we actually move forward, because this is not going to be a short-term thing. This is going to take us a little while. Does that give you where council's at?
Yeah, no, that's great, Kylie. And are elections going to be in this year, or are they moving those?
So the Municipal Association of Victoria did a complete survey of all councillors and councils over the last week. That's gone to the minister. The overwhelming feeling was that we should actually have elections deferred. And I know some people will be happy with that, some people won't. But at this point in time, it doesn't look like the minister will. The reason that our council felt this way was particularly from a democratic perspective. We feel that from a candidate perspective, for anyone who wanted to stand right now, your focus is not on about council. Your focus is just on whether you've got a job or whether you are now having to be the carer at home and trying to homeschool your children, be that male or female. Your focus is not on that. You actually can't go out and door knock. You can't go out and campaign. You can't go out and do all of those things. And from a democratic process perspective, we need that to be the case. The other side of it from a councillor perspective that we also all felt was that there is the possibility in any of our councils that you could have 9 brand new councillors who come in right in the middle of this pandemic, and actually having some surety across and knowledge across what is happening is actually a big deal for community. So they were probably the 2 main points of why we've asked. What we were told last night, though, being honest, from local government was that the minister confirmed that we will be single wards for the next council election, whatever, whether it goes ahead in October as planned or whether it's deferred to next October, that Maroondah, Whitehorse, Manningham in our area have all been moved from multi-wards to single wards. We don't even know what that looks like at this point in time. We haven't been told the ward structures. All we've been told is that we will be single.
Thanks for that, Kylie. And obviously, as always, if we can support you in any way, you know, as a group. I'll just hand to Dave now just to give us a brief outline of Lunchbox, and we'll certainly send the links out, Dave. And then over to Kerry for our finale.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, everybody. It's been enlightening to hear different perspectives from the different industries that people are working in. We were budgeted to do 1,000 presentations into sporting clubs this year, largely financed through 28 partnerships that we had who pay for sporting clubs to have our sessions on wellbeing and mental health, leadership, culture, drugs and alcohol, respect and equality, etc. Of course, we can't do those at the moment. And so we've set up the Salt Lunchbox webinar. We did it quickly without being able to achieve perfection, but we've been able to improve what we do as we go along. And we drew on some expertise largely through Edwina, through one of our board members, Lane Stretton, form our panel. And we've covered topics that Edwina will send out to you if you haven't had a chance to listen, about emotional agility, positive reframing of things that we're dealing with, how to positively parent your teenager or older child or younger child during periods like this. And what we have been able to create is a very positive community. We hear all of the bad news, but we do recognise the opportunity to trade in a different currency. And we worry about money, but we are seeing a lot of people writing in and saying, I wouldn't have had time to listen to this in the past, but I have now. And I'm pivoting, I'm rethinking my priorities, and I'm seeing some really good things come out of it. And what we know is that, we can serve out platitudes and say that everybody's going to come out of this bigger and better and stronger and richer, and they're not. Some are going to come out of it far, far worse. But many will actually use this time to create strong connections, new life habits, new ways of thinking. And it can be a great positive. So we're grateful in a sense, not for the loss of income that we've suffered, obviously, but for the opportunity to widen our network and to, I think, see a new frontier where we partner or collaborate more strongly with our communities, not just our sporting communities. We've always maintained that sport's not about sport, it's about people. It's just a good vehicle to reach people. And, if we go into a business, we'll say, real estate's not about real estate, it's about people's lives or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we would love to just look for opportunities to be able to serve you in any way that we can. We're looking for new topics, new contributors. We see this is going on after things return to a new normality. And we're very, very grateful to Ed, who stretches herself in so many different directions and has largely pioneered a lot of the content that we're covering and educated me no end on things I didn't know about. So, thanks for the opportunity to share with what you're doing, and love to have you be a part of what we're doing moving forward and have your contributions as how you think we might be able to do it better.
Thanks, Dave, and we'll send the links out to you. I'll just hand to Kerry, just share this image with you all. Kerry, just hand over to you.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for today and end with this Saturday being Anzac Day, which is going to be so different for everyone. Anzac Day is one of Australia's most important days of remembrance. Like so many are doing it at 6 a.m. on Saturday, stand on your porch or at the end of your driveway for 1 minute of silence. Maybe through the day you can reach out to make a neighbour or someone who's alone at this time of isolation. It's a perfect time to invoke the Anzac value of makeshift. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks everyone for your participation. That was just lovely, lovely way to finish. May the 5th, it looks like it will be 12:30, so we'll get the link out via Eventbrite. And please, we'd really love all members to be able to invite anyone that you think might be able to benefit. If there are some ideas for some topics and things that you would like to see as part of our we were jam-packed today, and apologies for going over time. We will make it an hour session, and I'm sure there'll be some more questions, and obviously wealth of knowledge of people who can answer those questions, and the generosity that we see in this group is just terrific. So thanks everyone, and please, if you want to leave some ideas in the chat, that'd be terrific, because we'll save that as part of, and this was recorded, so we'll work out how we can provide a link to it if you want to send that out, if there's people that may benefit from the information from today. But thank you for everyone for contributions. Thanks, Kylie, for your contribution, and please pass on our best to council, because we know that you are struggling along with everyone else, and I know you have your own business too, and we just really value the fact that you come and spend time and are so generous in supporting us. And I will email Chris and apologise that we didn't get to him before he had to go. Thanks to Dan. Thanks everyone, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Edwina.
Thank you.